If we can kick it off a little bit, come back to that question of the blogosphere. Is that what it's called? The blogosphere. Apparently so. Do you think now that with the ease of the ability to blog, and music fans can do that, music journalists can do that, there are companies set up to do it, do you think that the more traditional kind of record company models are starting to take more notice of that, or as much notice as that as perhaps they do to the music itself? I don't know, who should we go to first? Alex, maybe?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It definitely has changed what I do as a job. When I first started doing this, and the blogosphere didn't exist necessarily, it was more traditional in that there would be NME.com, there would be Gigwise, there would be certain key websites that we dealt with and talked to about the acts that we were working on. And now there's hundreds. I think, Karen, you mentioned before about sending it to 4,000 bloggers, but sending some music before.
Yeah,
there's a lot out there, and you can't really talk to all those people. Whereas back in the day when it's a bit more traditional, you get to know all the journalists and you could speak to them on the phone. And now there's so many that it's kind of it's difficult to PR them, if you like. It's difficult to have these personal relationships with all these people because there's so many out there. So it feels like it's changed everything, really.
And what about from a label perspective, or we can play it again some? Is this the kind of thing that you start to sort of? Does it appear on a radar if you're actually got some of your labels and your guys out looking at new artists and thinking about what's happening here? There's something going on. We should find out about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's now I think there's two sides to this. I mean, it's pre and post signing, right? If you're talking post signing and an artist we're working with, then inevitably you're going to want to use the world of online blogs and sites and outlets generally to just try and raise the level of kind of, I guess, hum around a band. You want that everyone talking about your band. But interestingly now, yes, I mean, we're seeing more and more where it's very interesting that a question now coming in pre-signing of a band is kind of, where are they online? Because we know that online can make a critical difference to the revenue streams around a band. Now, you shouldn't necessarily focus that on sales of the CD or downloads, because these days things are broadening out and people are looking for revenue streams elsewhere. But the question certainly remains of kind of, with the artist you're looking to sign, are they anywhere online? Are they going somewhere? Are they going nowhere? So it's a big factor now, unquestionably.
Yeah, and Karen, you mean 4,000 on your mailing list?
I think Hype Machine, which is the aggregator, I think they said they have 18,000.
Wow.
We don't. But I mean, we generally don't kind of email out to 4,000 people about a band. We kind of pick out the 20 most important ones. And I think the important thing to remember with blogs is that they're music fans, and that's why they do it, and they influence people. So it's not so much that, a blog like Big Stereo or something, it's not so much that 50 million people look at it, it's just that 500 people look at it, but those 500 people are quite influential people, so they're journalists and they run labels, and that's kind of where you need to be with those, but they're also other bloggers, so it kind of spreads from there.
Do they have history, these, the top ones? Have they been around for a period of time, perhaps in other areas of the music industry? Is that why they get listened to, or are they just very opinionated and very good at what they do? I
think they've built up a reputation. I mean, there's not many that come from other media, but I think the ones that are kind of considered reputable, or not reputable, but the ones that are considered most influential, so Pitchfork, which isn't really a blog, but Stereo Gum, Gorilla vs. Bear, I think they just have a track record of promoting music that gets big, or that gets noticed. I think there is kind of a blog sound, and I think that's something that is, I mean, I think Alex and I will probably get a bit frustrated, but because a lot of bands that are big on blogs never go anywhere, and they're quite boring. And I just think there's a blog sound, and it's kind of disappointing when labels take being big on blogs as a thing to sign a band with, because that doesn't always mean that they have a fan base or that they're very good. But there are tons of bands that are buzz bands that get big online. And I think, a good A&R person would sit there and be able to differentiate whether it's being big online or whether it's actually got a fan base and able to do anything.
And with Stunt, that's fairly new, isn't it, your company? So, I mean, are you going to do things a little bit differently with that?
Well, if I can just... I'm just going to answer something different, actually. Yeah. Just chipping into what Karen was saying. I think as a journalist it's interesting because I used to be the new music editor of NME before I was features editor, and I know that how it sort of worked when I did that, and when I picked the bands that I would fill my pages with and the Enemy would champion. It was largely by demos, if they were something that really stuck out, or they would be tip-offs from record companies and PRs and other people in the industry. Now, like, from what I know from people who work at those magazines and from my sort of last days at NME, those sort of decisions are very much led by blogs, very much led by, you know, there are a lot of people talking about this on the blogs was a sort of a phrase that would, you know, you would hear all the time. Yeah. And I think it's interesting what Karen was saying then is that sort of blog sound, and there's so many bands that I think music magazines have jumped all over as the sort of the next big thing, or the Emperor's New Clothes or whatever, because, you know, everyone on the blogs is talking about them, and those bands I struggle to remember the names of. They're things like Tapes and Tapes,
I was going to say that.
Cold War Kids, and like good bands actually, you know, if that's sort of what you're about. But certainly, you know,
do you think it can get to a bit sort of, artists can get a bit obsessed about, you know, and forget about some of the important things, which, you know, the music, that's what they're there to make, and suddenly the focus is shifted on kind of, oh my God, we've got to get onto this huge digital circuit. Do you think that sometimes there's a bit too much emphasis put on that by bands?
No, I think in a way the whole sort of thing's a little bit more contrived than maybe it was. I think that, you know, I think there's other people who'd be better qualified to speak about this, but definitely when I speak to bands, or sort of people away from sort of the writing side in the industry, you know, that they do talk about sort of which blogs they're going to hit and where they're going to get their music first, and there's almost a plot to how to break their music digitally before, you know, people like me who, you know, write a lot in print press pick up on it. But I'm not sort of really blaming the bands, really, to be honest, because I'm sort of waiting for music magazines to die. Like, I think it's preposterous, the idea of writing about music on paper these days, to be honest. I think that I'm really, you know, I live online, and I love the fact I can hear music while I write about it, and someone can read about music while they listen to it. And I sort of feel that I sort of feel a little bit like it's very inspiring the way that some bands are broken via the internet, the way they can grow their fan bases online, and they can communicate with their fans and so on. And I'm sort of blaming the music magazines really in such a way by sort of chasing the thing that's going to save their declining sales, as opposed to the bands for sort of having the nous to exist in this newish medium.
Are you finding this with what you do as well, Alex?
Well, it's become that thing where, like, certain labels or managers or whatever will say to me, like, you know, we want to get on the blogs, and I almost want to say which ones, because they don't know, didn't necessarily. You know, it's just like they know that this world exists there, and they know that we need to be in that world somehow. So it is a tough one, because, you know, the traditional route, which I often take, and I think it's really important still, is just the building blocks, you know, of a new band. But as a PR, I can phone up certain journalists and I can talk to them about it and ask them, have you listened to it? And I can push them slightly, give it a listen, see what you're. Whereas with bloggers, it's, you know, they like to feel like they've discovered it for themselves, and I don't want to push it too hard with them, because you'll end up getting probably a bad write-up off the back of doing that. So it's a really tough one in terms of a PR role, to try and, how do you work the blogs? I don't even know if I know the exact answer to that, but it's, you know,
it's weird. It feels to me though like, you know, people are discussing this in the context of the media platform through which you consume this information, and I think there's a good argument that really what we're talking about is filters, and, you know, it's an interesting what Karen says, where it's kind of, you wouldn't call Pitchfork a blog, you know, and same as you wouldn't call NME.com a blog. It's not. It's kind of it's a news outlet. It's slightly different, but only really in the sense that there's more money behind it, and it's more, you know, it's risen to the top as a kind of filter point for people. And ultimately, I think that's the key difference here, is, you know, finding those filter points where sites will rise to the top because of the quality of the recommendations and you know, what they put forward and what succeeds and things like that. And this kind of reference to blogs generally, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, that's just websites writing about music, and that could be, you know, NME.com at the top, or just, you know, any one of us just sitting there going, I really like the new album by blah.